I've actually got my journal from my yoga course last year. So I went back to Australia and did my yoga course with a bunch of veterans as an alternate therapy for PTSD and anxiety, depression, things like that. So we could basically take that information, the principles, back to our network and be able to, help people manage their minds and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, it was a veteran-heavy yoga course with all these, infantry soldiers that had been deployed numerous times to Afghanistan, war fighters, etc., etc. And the component on the course where we're diving into, female physiology, menstrual cycle and stuff, some of the boys are like, why the fuck are we learning this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, listen, fellas, when do most guys have issues when it comes to, anxiety, depression, PTSD? It's like normally something massive's happened in their life. They've lost their job, they've moved on from the military, they've lost their identity, they have a massive Barney with the missus, or the missus leaves with the kids, etc., etc. I'm like, guys, we need to understand what our partners are doing, where they're at on their menstrual cycle, so then we can go, all right, well, during this phase, probably not a good idea to bring up certain topics with them. Let's not create conflict during this phase. Let's maybe wait to this phase when things have balanced out a little bit and their hormones are a little bit more regulated, and it's going to be a lot more of an open conversation, open flowing conversation. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think there's anything to that?
Yeah, for sure, mate. Yeah, I think your other half's only going to really appreciate it if you try and understand them as much as possible. And
maybe you can help them understand what's going on as well. Because like you said, man, maybe they don't understand what's happening with their emotions. And, we'll talk about all the different physiological responses that occur through the different phases of the cycle and things like that, how to adjust that, adjust your training to suit that, how to adjust your nutrition, hydration, how to basically start putting these processes in place on a daily basis to work in line with what's happening with your biology, man, because you can't fight it, right?
Yeah.
Can't fight biology, you got to work with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And even if the effects for you aren't that profound, like some people fluctuate throughout the menstrual cycle a lot, other people less so, but it should still be pretty empowering to be able to proactively kind of deal with this stuff instead of reactively, like, I feel rubbish today, Like, I know a lot of girls, a lot of females that will kind of plan their life around it a little bit. Like, if you're not going to be your best self for 3 days out of the month, obviously if you're employed, it's a bit different, but if you're self-employed, maybe that isn't when you try and film content for social media, for example, you do that, in advance, or you don't plan going on a podcast if you know that affects you, but you can't do that if you don't understand it in the first place. So then those small tweaks to being proactive allow you to obviously feel very empowered and kind of taking back control of maybe matching your life, your training, your work, your relationship, whatever it might be, around that a little bit. Again, that's may or may not be too relevant. Some girls have PMS so bad, premenstruation syndrome symptoms so bad, that it's actually PMDD, so it's a disorder, and they have to go on antidepressants for a handful of days out of the month. That affects 5 to 10% of females at reproductive age with a menstrual cycle, which obviously is really, really, really sad. That's kind of quite soul destroying to know that you're going to go through that every month. And other females don't know when menstruation is starting for them if they're not tracking it, whereas some do, even if they're not tracking it, because they can be like, I feel a bit anxious and real low energy, and I've got a lot of cravings, I'm probably due my period in the next 2 to 3 or 4 days. You hear that quite a lot. But some females don't. They just, I started it today. Like they don't know, because those effects are just a lot less profound for them. So there is a massive range of responses to the menstrual cycle and how it affects you. So again, sometimes I'll be chatting about this and a girl will go, well, for me, and they just presume that therefore everyone else is like them. For me, I don't notice a difference. Everything's pretty consistent. Cool, that's great for you, but that isn't the case for everyone. Yeah. So for some of this information is kind of going to sit on a continuum of relevance and the potential, impactfulness that it will have depending on the individual.
What are some of the variables you think that can impact that?
A big one is genetics. So with people that have PMDD versus just PMS, there seems to be a different genetic response to how progesterone binds with the GABA receptor, which really affects mood. And that can also have an effect on whether birth control improves someone's mood and anxiety, or actually in some people it makes it a lot worse. So obviously that's something that, again, you need to kind of be a little bit in tune with and speak to your doctor about and kind of figure out. I think, again, I said this earlier because it's so true. So many girls are put on birth control at such a young age, they don't realise that they may be a little bit depressed and anxious versus how they would be and how they were, and they don't know that it's birth control causing that because they've been on it for 10,
that just becomes a norm
years.
for them.
It's just their norm. Yeah, they don't know. So one thing I do when I start working with a new female client, because this is very much an area which, like, as a guy, I don't really want to talk to them too much about, but I'm very aware of.
You don't want to be preachy.
Yeah, exactly. Because obviously there's a lot of legitimate reasons for taking birth control. Obvious one being contraception, but also it does decrease the risk of certain cancers, increases the risk of others. And it's not, that isn't a decision that just affects you, that obviously affects your other half, etc., etc. So how I'll always approach that is if they say they're on birth control on my intake form or the copper IUD or whatever it is, I send them a couple of articles. I've got ones that I like by Dr. Lara Bryden, and I'm like, I will never bring this up with you again unless you ask me to and reply to, but just since you've ticked that box, please just read these, and if you want to chat to me about it after, about maybe coming off or not, or have questions about it, we can do that. But if you want to read them and then go, I'm still happy being on it and I don't want to chat to you about that, that's absolutely fine. Not once have any of my female clients then read those and then not gone, thank you for that was interesting, I didn't know that, and about half of them then go, do you think you can help me come off? So a lot of females don't realise they're only fertile 6 or 7 days a month. I did one of my little quizzes on Insta stories, can you get pregnant any day of the month outside of your period? And I don't remember the exact numbers, but the majority said yes.
Really?
You're only fertile for 6 or 7 days, or you're fertile for less than that, but sperm can survive for a few days. So, if you have sex just before ovulation, then that might still cause, pregnancy. But so it's a 6 or 7 day window. So if you're very good at tracking, you can use the fertility awareness method with a very high degree of accuracy anyway. But most females kind of don't know that. So yeah, that's just one specific example kind of in terms of, birth control, the effects that it can have on mood and just how I approach it. And again, if any male coaches are listening, that's maybe what I'd recommend. So you're very much saying that I'm aware that, you might not want to talk to me about this as a guy and it's out of my scope as a fitness professional, but I wouldn't be doing my job, I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't just bring some awareness to this from a female doctor. You can read it from a female doctor. She's a doctor and a female.
I'm just a messenger.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know what you don't know, so it's my job to inform you of that. I think a lot of coaches very much stay in their comfort zone. I don't have all the answers, I'm not a doctor and I'm not female, but I'm not going to not pull on resources from females and or doctors to help with subjects that may be very... that may have a very large effect on why someone's coming to me. If they're coming to me going, I'm unhappy, I've got low mood, and that's part of their goal is to improve that, then 3 months later they might be a bit happier, they've lost some weight, they're a bit healthier. But if overall their mood is still really bad, that reflects badly on me. I've done them a disservice because they didn't achieve their goals. And if the underlying reason was birth control for them, how it affects them from a genetic standpoint is it really affects their mood, and I didn't bring that up and try and inform them on that, then that's my problem. That's not their problem.
Yeah. Have you had females come off birth control and then decide to go back on within 3 to 6 months because things have taken too long to balance out, things haven't improved, or they just essentially feel better taking birth control?
I've had 2 off the top of my head that have done that. One was for her skin. It did get bad afterwards, which is potentially a problem. This is the thing on birth control, just quickly to kind of help with the context of that question, is it doesn't balance your hormones. Just like if a guy takes testosterone, it doesn't balance your hormones. You stop your own internal production because you're taking an exogenous source. Because you're taking synthetic progesterone and or estrogen externally, you don't get some of the symptoms that may come with those high or low states naturally, but you're not fixing the underlying problem when you come off, which you're most probably going to do eventually if you want to get pregnant. All those problems are going to still be there, and some, because some of those problems, for example, heavy menses, heavy periods, those estrogen receptors get overwhelmed when you come off, just like when you go through puberty, and they can be very heavy. We can suppress the underlying reasons why you can have hormonal acne, and that can rebound even worse. So it doesn't fix the underlying.
What is that, sorry?
You can
hormonal
acne if you're taking it for your skin, which then the rebound effect can be worse initially. So it's one of those where it's like, if you're already on it, what do you do with that information? Coming off probably isn't going to be great for a few months. There is a lot of stuff you can do for that. It's known as post-birth control syndrome. the syndrome just meaning, for anyone that doesn't know, just like IBS or PCOS, it's not a specific diagnosis. And people say, oh, I've got PCOS or I've got IBS, well, what type? And they're like, oh, I don't know. Right. That's not a diagnosis. A syndrome just means a collection of symptoms which can't be diagnosed with another definition. So there's kind of different types or different root causes or different subcategories. So 2 women coming off birth control wouldn't have the same post-birth control syndrome. You know, your skin might get bad, your periods might get heavy, you might gain a little bit of body fat, your mood might get worse. You know, you don't know. There's a lot of variables to this. But what females kind of do, which make all of that worse, and you know, people in general do, but in particular females, is, and this is some stuff I know we're going to chat about, is they're on very low calories. They've always got the stress of overtraining and dieting. They're doing, they're micronutrient deficient because, and this is something I know we're going to chat about, you can't physically eat all of your micronutrient targets for the day on less than 1900 calories. The maths just doesn't add up. So you now have this huge disconnect between females dieting, and this is why females have so many problems dieting that guys don't, is just the number of calories they have to diet on, and that goes below the energy availability threshold, and by default, if you reverse engineer it, you're not getting insufficient fats, carbs, proteins, micronutrients. So you've got these girls coming off birth control, and then it's this quite sad situation where they're just not healthy because they're doing all of this stuff or not doing all of this stuff, and that makes it a lot worse. The last client I had come off birth control, we basically want to lay like a foundational protocol. So I was like, you know, let's come off in 2 or 3 months, let's get you as healthy as we can first. We've got calories to, off the top of my head, I think 2,400 on a training day, 2,200 on a rest day. She also had follicular and luteal phase splits, which is a bit more advanced and not relevant for most people, but different targets for different phases of her cycle. And we just ensured that she was managing stress. You know, we were just doing everything we could possible to get her as healthy as possible, mostly by reverse dieting calories up and therefore getting in sufficient food and sufficient macros. She came off birth control and absolutely 0 problems. Her cycle was actually back on the next one, which is quite rare. Normally that takes a few cycles, just absolutely fine. And again, there's a lot of genetic stuff to that for sure, but she was just as healthy as you could possibly be in terms of ticking those daily boxes: sleep, stress management, sufficient calories, etc., not overtraining, no post-birth control.
I was going to say, I'd make an assumption that you probably, you know, because most females are also addicted to like the cardio and the high intensity interval training. So
no hit.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd imagine that you'd like kind of reduce that stuff right back or cut it all out altogether and focus more on resistance training as you go through reverse dieting. Let's build a little bit of muscle, let's get the metabolism firing. It's a complex subject, man, but this is why we need to discuss it, right? There's so many things that go on, and if you're, you know, we've spoken about this before, like offline, like adding stress on top of stress, man, like the stress is linked to so many like health implications in the Western world, and you know, we need to manage stress as much as we can in all areas of life. Yeah.